Hi, this is Hui Wang. Welcome to Cloud Access Security Broker CASB Fundamentals. We will review the security responsibilities corresponding to each layers in the technology stack, and more importantly, we're going to understand how the responsibilities are shared between cloud provider and customers. When there is a security breach, who is to blame? Let's go back to the example we used at the very beginning of the course, where the story was that there were a couple of buildings for rent. And in this case, the landlord is the service provider, and your company who rented the entire building for office use is the customer. And you work in one of the floors in one of the offices here. Suppose one night, some of the critical assets in your company was stolen. In this case, should you blame the landlord and maybe sue them for not fulfilling the responsibility to secure the building? Well, it depends. If there was no security guard, or the gates or the door remained open the whole night, unlocked, then most likely the landlord would be held responsible for the loss. But in case it's one of your employees took the critical asset, took it out, or one of your employees was so careless that he lost his badge and the badge was taken by a bad guy. He used the badge, went straight into your office, took the valuable away. In these cases, you cannot finger point at the landlord. Simply put, the landlord as a service provider is responsible to secure the whole building, while you are responsible, your company is responsible for the control inside your offices and the control of the security behavior of your own people. In cloud computing topic, here we have the chart that lists the security responsibilities of three different service modes in cloud computing. Infrastructure as a service is also called IaaS. And platform as a service is also called PaaS. And here we have SaaS, software as a service. The example of IaaS, infrastructure as a service, is Amazon AWS EC2, where it's like it's similar to loan a VM and storage, and you can do the basic configuration on top of that. And here on the other end of the spectrum, SaaS, software as a service, the customer use the business logic and application features provided by the service provider. Examples of this are like Salesforce and Office 365. In between, we have PaaS, platform as a service. PaaS is mostly used by application developers and testers, where not only was the VM loaned as in SaaS, but also the service provider providing platforms, tools, libraries, and the capability of provisioning and maintenance and deployment, so that the developer would only need to focus on the coding, and the hassle of maintenance is handled by the service provider. So regardless of these three service modes, the technology stack is actually the same. On the bottom, you have the facilities of the data center and the server pool or a cluster, and on top of that, the abstraction layer, the different hypervisor. And then you configure the platform on top of that, the application running on the platform. And you have user data there and access and identity control to access the data and the application. So for all the three service modes, the actual bottom-up three bottom layers, the security responsibility are totally with service providers. The service providers should take care of the physical asset and the hypervisor layer and the VM isolation. And moving up a little bit, the application and platform layer is where the responsibilities split between customer and service provider. In the case of infrastructure as a service, the customer will take care of the configuration, and therefore they take care of the whole platform and application security. On PaaS, well, the platform or tools, libraries provided by the service provider, but the application developer should factor in the security concerns of the application he's developing and follow the security coding rules or best practices. Well, in this case of service as a software as a service, well, the software is provided by the provider, so the service provider should be responsible for the security. For example, you wouldn't be responsible for the vulnerabilities of Office 365, and Microsoft should take care of that and issue the security patch if a vulnerability is found. Regardless, data and user access and identity security falls in the responsibility of the customer, because customers need to establish policies and procedures to ensure the roles, criticalities, and the level of the privilege in the access. A service provider might provide very basic authentication, authorization, offer APIs for integration, but the more granular protection must be implemented by the customer. The same principles, same rules apply on the data especially. Service provider might offer some high-level protection, but there's no one-size-fits-all. The data protection must be tailor-made for each customer. This chart is not a recommendation, it's actually the accepted practice in the industry. Take a look at AWS. When you sign a contract with a service provider, you will certainly sign the customer agreement or user agreement, terms of use. And you accept this, but you might not read into that. So it is really important for your legal department to review that. Here in the published Amazon customer agreement, there is a section explicitly talking about responsibility. And let's zoom in here. AWS very clearly stated that it is your responsibility to cover your accounts, your content that includes your data, your security and backup, and your login credentials and accounts, and your own end users. All these apparently are customers' responsibility. Any breaches caused by the vulnerabilities of these areas is not Amazon's responsibility. Now let's have a short quiz putting together what we have learned so far. And by the way, if you are preparing for certificate test, you might run into some problems with pretty lengthy description of the question, and the question might take up the entire paragraph, even longer than this one. So to be well prepared for such kind of test, you will need to get used to the lengthy description. Now back to our question. Which of the following assets are consistently secured by provider alone or the customer alone regardless of service mode? That is, the security ownership does not vary per service mode. Consistently, the security ownership is either by provider all across the three modes, or by the customer all across three modes, but not shared. Now pause the video and give it a thought. Okay, let's go through the options one by one. User identity no matter what service mode you use, it certainly would be consistent over to the customer. And business application as infrastructure, as a service user, the application should be managed by yourself. But as a SaaS, software as a service user, the application is managed by the provider. So this is a shared responsibility. And business data across all service modes, business data should be owned and secured by the customer. And we just talk about business application in the first choice. So choice 1 and 2 are both not the right answer. Choice 3, hardware. Well, physical assets should be strictly confidential and solely owned and managed by the provider. And customer in any mode will not be able to access hardware. So that's consistently over to the provider. Platform, again, as an IaaS customer, platform would be managed by the customer himself. And as a, for example, SaaS, software as a service, the platform is over to the provider side. So this is a shared responsibility. Business data is responsibility goes to the customer, and hypervisor, whether Zen or VMware or Hyper-V, this is totally owned and managed and secured by cloud provider. So question option number 4 would be the right answer. The business data consistently managed by the customer and hypervisor consistently secured by provider. Hopefully by now we have the answer to the question we raised at the beginning of this video. When there is a breach, who will be responsible? Well, it depends on the cloud stack, and we understand who owns what, so we can know who should be held responsible. For those parts that should be taken care of a customer, CASB is a very useful technology. But in the next video, we'll have first an overall picture of security before we deep dive into CASB solution alone. Until next time, see you then. Thank you.